Your host, Natalie McLean. My co-host today is Nick Trevino. Glenda Hayes is our backup moderator. And on the technical side of things, we have Stephen Wojtkowski and Susan Kaufman from Clayton Library. Clayton Library Friends is a nonprofit organization that assists the Clayton Library Center for Genealogical Research by coordinating with the manager of Clayton, which is Susan, to organize fundraising to support the acquisition of research material for the library, upgrade facilities, and enhance library services. A few months after COVID started, the Friends started doing an online roundtable discussion for Clayton Library Friends members and the general public related to genealogical research. We invite you to join our organization if you're not a member already. Now, today, our topic for our webinar is the Bataan Death March, A Soldier Story by Carol Pena. She will touch on the history of the fall of Bataan and remember the fallen and survivors of the Bataan Death March. It will include the story of one soldier who survived and the genealogical resource and sources that tell his story. Carol A. Pena is a native Texan with a passion for genealogy and creative writing. This fifth-generation Texan has been researching her material line since 2011. Carol is an active board member of the Bay Area Writers League and has published family stories in several anthology-style books. Connect with Carol on her website, www.carolpena.com. So Carol, I'm really interested in this subject because my dad was in World War II, but he was in the European theater. So I'm really interested in hearing about the Pacific side of things. And so I'm ready to hand it off to you. So take it away, Carol.
Thank you so much. Okay, let me share my screen here. Screen one. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes. Thank you so much. Well, my name is Carol Pena, and I've spent the last 45 years and my entire career working in information technology. Most of it as a database administrator, working with large-scale Oracle databases. I've always loved hearing my mother's family stories. And family history has always been really important to us. And I have published several stories in anthology-style books. But in 2011, I began researching my maternal line, and that research took me to Clayton Library. At Clayton, I found a book on the shelf for Gonzales County marriages, where my maternal great-grandparents were listed. So I at that point had found their marriage date. The other thing at Clayton was I was able to purchase this book called Gonzales County History. And there is a very brief paragraph about my second great-grandmother and her husband, who were among the first settlers of Welder, Texas in 1880. So you guys be sure to check out claytonlibraryfriends.org/books. You're going to find some gems, I promise. In 2015, we had a family reunion for my maternal line. And my great-grandmother and her husband had 10 children. Now, each child had between 4 and 14 of their own children. So a family history presentation really had to get narrowed down, or it would be hours long. So what I did was I took one family member from each child and I focused on that one person. And so for me, in the Martinez family line, my focus was my first cousin, once removed, Camilo Martinez. Now, Camilo was born to Duihildo Martinez and my great aunt, Luisa Hernandez. He was the fourth of 8 children. And according to the 1920, 1930, and 1940 census, they lived in Gonzales County, Texas. This photo was courtesy of the Martinez family for that 2015 reunion. From left to right is younger brother Leon, who also served in World War II in, I believe he was in Italy. In the center there is my great aunt, Luisa. And then on the far right is Camilo. And I dated this photograph 1946 based on his service stripes on his left arm. And I know how many stripes are on that, or it should be there after the war, based on his separation document that they also shared. I always knew that he was a prisoner of war during World War II, but I didn't know what his unit was or where he was stationed at the time. But as I said, his family shared that separation document, and that gave me a wealth of information. What it told me was that he was with B Company and the 92nd Tank Battalion. So my very first search result for Company B, 192nd Tank Battalion, was the BatanProject.com. Now here, oh, let me just tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover in today's presentation. So we're going to talk about how he went from farmer to soldier. And then we're going to touch on his draft card, his enlistment record, where I found the information on his deployment. We'll touch on the fall of Bataan, and we'll take a look at the POW camps and hell ships that he was transported on. And then we'll take a look at my most recent find, which is his hospitalization record. And then we'll take a second look at his discharge. So how many ways can you spell a name? Well, we've all learned you can spell them a whole bunch of different ways. And for Camilo, his name is misspelled quite a lot. Now in, this aside, the United States passed the Selective Training and Service Act of 1940 in September. It required all men the ages of 21 and 45 to register for the draft. And he did within the month. This is a look at his draft card, the front and back. His name is listed as Camito, which I'm not sure why he spelled it that way. It may have just been what he was used to being referred to as, a term of endearment. And his lettering is unique. I've never seen an I with an underscore at that, but he did that on both the first name and last name. His address is Welder, Texas, Gonzales County. He was 22 years old at the time. It does list his place of birth as Gonzales County. His country of citizenship is the USA. His birth date, of course, is 1919, July 18th. It lists his father, Jubigildo Martinez, as his primary contact with his address. His employer's name is Mrs. Broadfield in Welder, Gonzales, Texas. His name is spelled C-A-M-I-L-O, Martinez. On the back side, we see that his race was first marked as white, and then that was marked out and marked Indian. I'm not sure why. There are no facts to support that he was Indian. But other than that, his height was approximately 5 feet 7 inches and weighed approximately 140 pounds. His eyes were brown, his hair was black, and he was of light brown complexion. It is signed by the Mr. Otis Henderson, the registrar, Precinct 9 of Welder, Texas, and it's dated October 16th, 1940, and stamped at the Burchard Building October 17th, 1940 in Gonzales County, Texas. Within a few months after his draft card was completed, he was enlisted. And we're going to go to that website and take a really quick look at that. And you know, some of these records are found on Family Search, Ancestry, Fold 3, and this is the preferred website that I like to go to, because there's so much more that you can get out of this website when you do a search. And if you can see my screen, the number of records in that first series is 9 million records. That's a lot of records to go through. And I could go through and do a search on his name as it is spelled correctly, but his name was misspelled quite a bit. So if I look at these two records that were returned with that name, I see two people, one from Texas, but he was a resident of El Paso, not Gonzales. And the other was a resident of Mexico. So these are not him. I could also go back and search on just his first initial, but then what does that do? Well, the same enlistment series returns 1,300 records. And I can search through that, and I can search, and I can search, and I can search, and I can search through all of these pages here. And I would find him eventually. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up, and I am going to search by his Army serial number. And as we'll find later in another slide, we will see that that serial number can also be mistyped. So this is my relative. His name is misspelled, but it is him, Gonzales County. Place of enlistment was Fort Sam Houston, Texas. Enlistment day was the 19th of March, 1941. It shows that he went in as a private, and this grade code is nothing more than showing that he was a private. And if you wanted to learn more about these values and these codes, you simply click on the field title and it opens another pop-up. Be sure and let me know if you can't see these. And it tells you a little bit about the code, and then it has this code list. And you can view it, and you can look at all the possible codes that you'll find listed for that field. And you can also download it if you needed to reference it again. And I'll show you another one because I think another one of these has some really good information on it as well. So he was a civilian prior to entering the military. It lists his native state of Texas. He was born in 1918. He was single without dependents. And then you'll find the box number and real number. So we're going to hit the back button, and I want to show you another record because I want to show you what else you can find by doing a search here. We're going to look at this record. Now, this record really talks about one of the camps that he was at. But remember, I told you that I found his record I found a lot of information on his unit and on his experience during World War II at the batanproject.com website, right? Well, the National Archives references this website. It says provisional tank group rosters from the Batan Commemorative Research Project website. That's batanproject.com. And the contributor to that website is a man by the name of Roger Manzel. Now, if you had somebody that was in Guam, this is his book. You should really read it. He's got he did a lot of research and it's listed. But if we click on source here, and then you view the code list here, you're just going to see a wealth of sources that you could download and go back and research from. And it lists books and libraries where memoirs are kept. It lists so much information. It gives you websites, tells you where you can find some oral histories, so much information. As I was saying earlier, World War II was one of the most documented wars. And then this is the Manzel website that Batan Project links to. And I have to say that some of these links are broken. So you may not, don't wait too long because you may not find it. And you know, what I like to do is I like to go through and print everything to a PDF, so I keep it in my records. So that was a little bit about his enlistment and a little bit about how to use that National Archives website. Now, this is the separation document that his family provided, and this is one that actually had a correction to it. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at it just because it's easier on the eyes, and we're going to take a really close look at it. So if you can't see it, please let me know in the chat. And if somebody would monitor the chat for me, that would be great. Now, this document, as you can see, in 1946 was not called a DD-214. This is form number 16, and it was called Army Discharge Record, War Department, AGD, I think that's Adjunct General. Form number 5355, and it's got its date stamp of the 1st of November, 1944. And I can't read this stuff over here, but it misspelled his name, Camelo. So Camilo, this is to certify that Camilo Martinez, serial number 3829535, corporal. He was promoted at the end of the war from private to corporal. Company B, 92nd Tank Battalion. He was stationed at Clark Field, Philippine Islands. This is really where my search began. This was the first thing I stuck in Google and searched for. This is to certify, okay. Army of the United States is hereby honorably discharged from the military service of the United States of America. This certificate is awarded as a testimony of honest and faithful service to this country, given at Separation Center, Fort Sam Houston, Texas. The 6th of July, 1946. And so as we scroll down, we see a lot of the same information that was in his draft card and some information that was in his, also in his enlistment information. Well, what we see here is at the end of the war, His permanent address now is Luling, Caldwell County, Texas. And we see that his weight is now 160 pounds, and he has one dependent. He's listed here as married. And I've since found his marriage on the Caldwell County. It's not, what is that? I can't remember the name of that website, but I did find his marriage record. He married in January of 1946.
Was it Gen Web?
Yes, yes, Texas Gen Web. And because I hadn't been able to find it on Ancestry. Now, when he ended his service, this is the correction that was made. This box 23 is now empty. And there was, it looks like 6 days between the date of induction and the date of entry into active service. That occurred at Indian Station, Gonzales, Texas. The selective service data was marked as registered. He had registered for the draft in Gonzales County. And at the time he was living in Welter, Gonzales County, Texas. He was a gunner. And this lists his battles and campaigns as Philippine Islands. Now this anti-submarine, I don't know enough about military history to understand what this is telling me. This is some type of general order, whatever 105 is. I've not been able to correlate that to any particular thing. Anti-submarine usually means he was on a ship of some type. And maybe it was related to his withdrawal. I'm not sure, but if we look further down, and box 35 says he received smallpox, typhoid, tetanus, and cholera immunizations in March. Box 36 tells us when he left the US and when he returned. It gives us those departure and arrival dates. So he left the US in October of 41. The destination was the Asiatic Pacific. He arrived November 18th, almost a month later. And then when he left in October 45, returning to the US, and he arrived October 13th. For a total length of service, continental service, was 1 year and 3 months and 18 days. This continental service was a combination of training, maneuvers, and hospitalization. For 3 years, 11 months, and 24 days, he was in Japan as a prisoner. I'm gonna come back to some of this other information later. And we're gonna go to the next slide. Now, Batan Project was it started out as a student project. Students from the Provincial Township High School used old newspaper articles to put together profiles for the men of Company B, 192nd, because they were in the same neighborhood as the high school. And I'm just going to take you to that website because I want to show you some things. And I'm taking you directly into his profile. These are things that I have been able to verify. He was at this camp. All POWs went to this camp. This is the ship that took him from, well, we'll get into that in a little bit. So this is a this is not a hell ship. There are hell ships listed. This is one of them. This is a camp. This is a camp, and this is a camp. And this website has so much information. It touches on his personal family life, touches a little bit on his, where he started out. I've not found verification of this, but and there is a lot of things on this website that I am using mainly as a reference, and not until I can find an actual source document will I put it on my tree. But what it does say is that it is not known if he volunteered or if he had his name drawn to join the 192nd. But after he joined the battalion, he was assigned to Company B. It goes on and it gives a little bit of the history. The 192nd was mainly composed of men from that National Guard unit. The National Guardsmen only had to, according to this website, only had to provide a year's service. But I'm not going to go through, I'm not going to scroll through all of this. I'm just going to jump down to a source that I want to show you. This was a POW camp, and according to this website, it's where POWs worked as dock workers. And this was also the camp that he was rescued from. Now I'm going to go take a look at this. That link takes me to one of Roger Manzel's, well, to Roger Manzel's website. And specifically, it takes us to the source documents and the information for this camp. And as you can see, it does tell us quite a bit. Where it was at, the timeline, and most importantly, in this PDF, it gives us, shows us the source document, gives us statistics on who was there. Well, from the USA, 230 were there, 100 Brits, 19 Australians, 1 Dutch, for a total of 350. And if we jump down to page 4, here's my cousin, Camilo Martinez, in the Army, private first class. This is his serial number, but if you see this serial number, you think, oh yeah, that looks like his serial number. That's not his serial number. His serial number ends in 535. It was mistyped. And then when we go down to page 12, for even more information, let's see if I can scroll this up a little bit. Okay, it's not going to let me do that, so I'm going to have to swish it around. So this roster has name, service, rank, card number. I think this is like a prisoner number. Former camp information. And then this is his serial number. I'm not quite sure what these remarks indicate. We're just going to scroll down and take a look at Camilo's record here. And here he is, Martinez Camilo, private first class. This is his prisoner number, 2653. His prior camp was 1915, which, if I'm not mistaken, is his time in Taiwan, at the prisoner camp in Taiwan. Formosa was the name of it. And here again is his serial number. And yes, 839029 is correct, but now it listed as 335. So from page 4 to page 12, it's not typed correctly, but this is him. All right. Back to the slideshow. So as I said before, do your due diligence when you're working on websites and you're not sure where the sources are coming from. This book is by Donald Caldwell, and I love this book. And you guys tell me if he is a member of Clayton Library Friends, because I would love to reach out to him. The jacket of the book says he's from the Houston area. This book is loaded with lots of history on tanks in general, on tank battalions, on some of the campaigns, and specifically to a lot of the guys in the 192nd, 194th, and a lot of the companies in, anyway, check out the book. I love this book so much. I bought it on Audible because I find listening while I work, I can get through the book a little bit quicker. But then when I saw the content, I thought, no, I need to get that book in my hands. It's got really cool pictures in it. It's got great maps, and it's got, of course, the bibliography in the back that gives you more sources. So I highly recommend this book. Okay, so far we have touched on a lot. But now we come to the point where he's been in the Philippine Islands for about 4 or 5 months. And what happens the month after he gets there? What primary US event happens within weeks of him arriving in the Philippines? Well, the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, and the US enters World War II. In the time between Pearl Harbor and April 9th, 1942, Japan has managed to prevent supplies, food and supplies, to reach our soldiers. Once Bataan has fallen, the Death March began. And here you see an article from Manila on April 24th. And at this point, the Japanese have already taken control. What this article does is it portrays the Japanese as helpful liberators. But in reality, they were committing brutal war crimes like the Bataan Death March. In this picture, you'll see that soldiers are already thin and emaciated. They have their hands tied behind their backs. They called it a death march because the march began on the southern tip of the peninsula in Marileves. Forgive me on the pronunciation of these. As they were walking from this city to Cabcapen, Japanese were firing artillery at US and Allied soldiers on Corregidor. And they were shooting back. Anyone caught in that crossfire may survive, they may not have survived. It was a gamble. They traveled from Marilivas up to San Fernando. And I believe that my cousin was in this area when the death march began. But I haven't found confirmation of that on paper. When they get to San Fernando, they're put in boxcars and travel this railroad up to Capas. From Capas, they walk 10 miles, another 10 miles to Camp O'Donnell. And this is a 66-mile walk to San Fernando and another 10-mile walk to Camp O'Donnell. With little food, no water. 10 miles a day they averaged. When they were crammed into those boxcars in San Fernando, this is the small boxcar. The Japanese forced 50 to 60 men into this smaller car. The larger car contained about 150 to 160 men. They were packed so tightly that it became impossible to sit down. And I'm going to read just the last few lines of this plaque that they put after they restored this particular boxcar. And it reads, "The car under the sweltering sun rapidly became an oven, and men suffocated in the heat. Those afflicted with dysentery could not control their defecation, and soon the floor of the car was filthy with excrement, urine, and vomit. Many died where they stood in the boxcars. This boxcar is the last known surviving freight car of its kind and is a mute witness to the human sacrifice and heroism of all those who were victims of the Bataan Death March. It serves as a memorial to the horrors of war and to man's inhumanity to his fellow man." And these pictures were taken off of the Batan Project website. This is a couple of pictures of two of the ships he was on. He was on a third one. And I won't go into a lot of detail about it. I did find these pictures on the west-point.org website, westpoint.org. And they have a lot of detail on it. These two pictures were taken by a man who was with Company A of the 192nd, and it was provided by one of his children to the West Point site. But it gives a lot of, I'll just touch on a little bit of this. On October 1st, 1944, approximately 1,100 POWs boarded the Hokusan Morrow at Pier 7 in Manila. They suffered in the holds until October 3rd, before it was able to join a convoy and departed Manila. The convoy was attacked by submarines on 2 different occasions, and the Hokusan Morrow was one of only 4 ships left in the convoy to arrive in Hong Kong. So more suffering for these soldiers. Of the POW camps that I have found, over the course of these 3 years, 11 months, and 28 days, he would be moved from camp to camp to camp. And I do have sources for several of them. This Bilibid prison was actually a civilian prison, and it was converted to a POW camp during the Bataan Death March. Formosa is Taiwan, and they have their own website, POW Taiwan. This was one of the sources in the list that I showed you earlier. And here he is. It says he was private 192nd B Tank Battalion, U.S. Army. The camp name that he was at is this Toruko. I didn't see the source records. All I saw in this website is the database that contains the information. Oops, sorry about that. The next one is the Osaka one that I showed you earlier. I did have two sources for that. One I showed you earlier, this one, I'm gonna show you. This one has his name misspelled again. And I don't know if it's because the ampersand is meant to be some kind of identifier that says there are multiple spellings of it or what. I'm still learning a lot about these codes. It says he was in the Southwest Pacific Theater, Philippine Islands. And I believe this was after he was liberated, maybe October 45. Yes, it was after he was returned to military control. Detaining power was Japan, and this camp is where he was at. I think many of them went there to get processed out. But again, what you find on Ancestry may not include all of this detail. So even though you find it on Ancestry or Family Search, be sure to come out here, because sometimes I think you may get a little bit more. And of course, this Niyoga is the one that we navigated to from the Batan Project, so I won't go through that one again. So let me have a time check here. We're not quite done. I have a lot more to cover, so I'm going to have to go through this very quickly. But I do have a warning with the next slide. The next slide is going to be very difficult to view. So if you have any problem with nightmares after seeing things, you may want to close your eyes or turn away. After they were liberated, they were found in a condition that is just despicable. August 15th is called Victory Day over Japan, or it's called Victory in the Pacific Day. Japan surrenders, ending World War II. It occurred August 15th there. The news breaks in the US on August the 14th due to time differences. These men were rescued from the Bilibid prison camp and depicts the condition of most POWs after approximately 3.5 years of captivity. It's very sad. In his book, Batan Uncensored, Colonel E.B. Miller is going to give us the context for the slide that's coming. E.B. Miller was a member of the 194th, I believe, Tank Battalion. In the introduction, it quotes an editor who worked with Colonel Miller. And it reads, I quote, "He partook of the meager portions of rice handed out grudgingly, brushed the worms off, and later swallowed them, not being too particular. He slumped down like the others to face a tin can containing nothing but a sickly cucumber soup, and to stare at the rice that was composed mostly of sweepings. He recalls rokoshuri, where snakes were caught and roasted, where larvae from wasp nest were roasted, where any root that could be chewed or used as for food. He can remember soup that contained nothing but pieces of common weed, jerked from the ground by work parties consisting of men who only had one aim: to live," unquote. And that's by William P. Stevens, managing editor of the Minneapolis Tribune. This is Camilo's World War II hospital admission card file. It states his name. His admission age is now 27. It is October 1945. He is admitted to Letterman General Hospital in California. The type of injury is listed as disease. Type 2 is not traumatism. It lists his rank and serial number. His rank and branch. Oops. His length of service is closer to 5 years. His medical diagnosis is Ascaris infection with a secondary diagnosis of malnutrition. I had to go and look up what Ascaris infection is. And the definition I found reads, Ascariasis is caused by ingesting those worm eggs. This can happen when hands or fingers that have contaminated dirt on them are put in the mouth, or by eating vegetables or fruits that have not been carefully peeled, washed, or cooked. And they didn't get any vegetables. He was discharged from the hospital on March 1946. The discharge place is listed as Convalescent Hospital, ZI. I had to look that up. That stands for Zone of the Interior. I do have a link to that definition and the hospital locations as well. There was listed among them is the Fort Sam Houston Hospital. It does note that he was a repatriated prisoner of Japan, and he was repatriated during the current year. I was so hoping to find his weight. I was so hoping to find that he was not like one of those in that earlier picture, but I haven't found anything yet. These were also provided by the family. The picture on the left is him at some point after he was rescued. I can't tell where this picture is taken at, but he is, if you compare him to the picture on the right, which is in 1946, he was remarkably noticeably thinner. The picture on the right is him with his wife, looking much healthier, thank God. Again, this is his discharge paper. We'll take a quick look here at his decorations and citations. I know it's hard to read, and I shouldn't really read through all of these because for the lack of time here. What he didn't receive in terms of medals is this POW medal, which was instituted in 1985. I found references to this medal on lots of different websites, including the National Archives. But the National Archives actually points you to a website on Manzel's page where the link is kind of broken. You can't get to everything, but this website is the Defense POW and MIA Accounting Agency. They also have list of unaccounted men who never made it back, and there's no record of them. So, and it's for not just for World War II, but other wars as well. So if your soldier was a prisoner of war, please make sure that his family gets this and he gets his recognition. Life after the war for my cousin, well, he got married, like I said, in January of 1946. They raised 7 children, including a set of twins. I'm sure he worked. If he had 7 children, I'm sure they both probably had to work. I don't have any information on where. I know his father passed away in 1949 of a heart condition. And the family tells a story of how him and my great aunt were so distraught when they got that first letter from the War Department, which there's a sample of on the Bataan page. And so it's not surprising that he died from heart failure. After the war, he lived in Luling for his remaining days, and his family still lives there today. Camilo Martinez died November 4th, 1992. I'm going to take you to this website. I'm just going to take a few more minutes. This is his Find a Grave page. And I wanted to show you that Tony, whoever Tony is, added the marker and added the picture and made that picture beautiful. It's such a good picture. Tony does a lot for veterans. And if you get a chance, you should come back and click on Tony. He's a contributor for Find a Grave, and he gets everything out there. Also, be sure when you find somebody on Find a Grave, be sure to check to see if there are any more of the same surname. When I went out here, I found him, of course. I found his father. I found his wife. And I found his mother. 3 more family members. 3 more family members to add information on your family tree. And so we thank Camilo for his service, and we honor his memory. And we do that by helping people research a veteran and share that information. The National POW MIA Recognition Day is in September. There is a toolkit that shows you how to set up a missing man table. Please visit the World War II museums, and there is an annual memorial walk. And usually they're held throughout the United States by different groups. This one happens to be the larger one. They are virtual this year, which means that you can register and get sponsors, and then you can walk the number of miles in your area without having to travel. It's normally held in White Sands. And do we have any questions? I'm sure we do.
We do have a couple.
Okay, good.
So first of all, wanted to mention that the Clayton Library is going to expand their hours. The new hours are going to be Tuesday, Wednesday. Let me just put that in the chat log. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday from 10 to 5. And as you may have noticed, Thursday was missing from that list. Because the new hours on Thursday are going to be 12 to 7. So wanted to make sure everybody knew about that. And okay, so the question that I believe Natalie asked was about the separation document, and it appeared that you had gotten that out of the family's heirloom attic. But do you know how someone might obtain a copy if they don't have one?
Yeah, you can go to the nara.gov, and there's a whole, let me see if I can show it to you. There's a whole page of information on how. I don't know if that's in the handout or not, but you can go to the National, was it National Archives and Records Administration.gov. I've actually requested some files as well. It's very slow. It's a very slow turnaround because of the pandemic. But yes, you can request them. Once they approve it and they get the records, then they tell you how much it's going to cost, depending on how many records they're able to find.
Now, Carol, my dad always said his records were burned. And so that's why I was wondering if that's like a separate record or something that possibly, so you think it would be at National Archives then?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Well, and if they don't have any, they'll tell you.
Okay.
But they'll have some. I don't know how many of them they would have gotten burned.
The ones that burned were stationed in St. Louis. If they were the Army,
Yeah,
and then
Army.
of course, the Air Force was in the Army at that time, and there was this big fire back in shoot, when was it?
1974. 1974.
Thank you, Natalie. 74. And I'm with you, Natalie. I wrote for my father's discharge papers, and they were one of the ones that were burned and everything. My father did have a little card that he carried with him, which had his discharge stuff on it, which I think a lot of veterans did to show that they're veterans. I spent hours and hours and finally blew up all the information off of it to get a lot of the similar information that Carol had on her discharge. So her discharge paper had a whole lot more information than mine did.
Right.
And everything. But a lot of them, if you were in the Army or the Air Force, there's a good chance you can always it didn't burn them all, but it burned most of them.
Yeah, there's always a chance.
I heard that they were making an attempt to try to recreate some records. But that was before the pandemic. That was before the pandemic. That was right before the pandemic. You know, they said something about they were going to try to from other records. And so I don't know if that probably got scrapped because of the pandemic. You know, it probably never got off the ground.
Right.
And so,
well, was he buried in a military cemetery? A veteran
well,
cemetery?
no, my father didn't die in the Army and all that. So he's in a regular cemetery. So,
Right.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes they put a rush on records for those who are needing it for burial.
right.
Yeah.
So Carol, you're getting lots of kudos in the chat log here. So you definitely want to download that for your memory file.
Thank you.
And a lot of people contributing memories of their own veterans, and what interesting one here by Bill Butcher. General Jonathan Wainwright lived in San Antonio in the 50s and was being treated by a local dentist for whom my mother worked as a nurse. She had him sign his book for me, and I still have it. He always preferred and used green ink in his fountain pen.
Wow.
So, you know, I put something in the chat log about hell ships because I had never heard that term before. And, you know, so I don't know if you want to enlarge on that at all, but apparently those were the ships that they were all transported on. Yep,
from camp to camp. That's how they got them there.
Mm-hmm.
in some of these books, and even some of the oral histories that I listen to, they go into a lot of detail. You know, they talk about how the Japanese wanted the men down there to be quiet. Well, they're sick and they're going crazy being stuck in that small area down below, you know, in the hulls of the ship. And to the point where sometimes they were just shot because they'd go crazy, lose their mind, and they couldn't get them to be quiet, and they were shot.
Mm.
And it's very tragic.
It is. It very is. Nick, do you want to talk about the program for next week since it's yours?
Sure. So we call it the orange and the green because, you know, growing up as a kid, of course, I celebrated St. Patrick's Day, as did we all, and, you know, wore the green, and so I didn't get pinched and all of that. But once I started delving into the family history, I realized that there was this division. And of course, we've heard a little bit about how the Catholics and the Protestants were fighting each other. But the Protestants in Ireland identified themselves with the color orange. So mine is going to be kind of a general overview of how to research your ancestors in Ireland, but kind of a case study of these Protestant ancestors that were from Northern Ireland. And so there'll be a fair amount of discussion about Northern Ireland and the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland and things such as that. And then, of course, my only trip overseas has been to Ireland, and it was a great joy. So you'll hear about some of my discoveries along the way.
Right. Anybody else?
So I think unless there's a question that somebody wants to give verbally at this point. Do we have any questions for Carol? I know we're going a little long today.
Well, if there are none, you can always email me and reach out and I'll respond.
Okay, thank you.
That was fabulous, Carol. Really,
It's great.
really
It's great,
fascinating.
Carol. So
Thank you.
Yes,
informative.
it was really good.
And
Thank you.
your
Very
experience on the NARA website, we're gonna have to have you back and just talk about that.
I think so too.
Thank you.
Everything. It's nice seeing everybody. Look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
All right, thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, was Sue going to make